What I want to talk to everyone about is media. How do we get media? Let's say you have an event and you're trying to get publicity for it. How do you do that? So, engaging news media is the topic. Understanding the old and new media is really the biggest picture you have to start with. Because basically, you have any media training, you need to understand that the media world is changing very, very rapidly. Okay. And I'm going to contrast for you old versus new media. Some people call it legacy media versus new media. There's a variety of ways of pitching it. But the legacy media is basically what you normally think. The problem with it, it's really dying. It's not dead, but it is dying quickly. It's declining in trust, credibility, legitimacy. They ignore legitimate news. They cover the woke agenda. There's been this rise of digital independent media, which is the new media, which has kind of suppressed the legacy media. They have shown open hostility towards Christianity, towards conservative values, toward MAGA. And so all these things together have decreased the legacy media's influence, even just economics alone. For instance, in Orlando Sentinel, they used to have an enormous building where they would literally print the newspaper. All the reporters were there. They don't have any building at all. They sold it because of economic pressures, and they're all working now by Zoom. They meet twice a day. So it's really a different dynamic completely. I mean, even when the big newspapers and the legacy media, New York Times, whoever, when they try to go online, there's a lot of clickbait. There's a lot of ads you have to walk through, and it just becomes this morass. So again, it's the reason why local newspapers are declining. ABC, NBC, CBS is declining. They used to be the gatekeepers, right? What they said was basically the same thing on ABC, CBS News, NBC. It was all the same thing, but now that has all changed. So legacy media, old media is daily newspapers, the major networks. I would include Fox in that as well. Every community also has a 24-hour news station. Radio talk shows are still considered legacy media, but they're a good source of media. They're kind of in between, but there's a lot of conservative radio talk. And then there's news services, the Associated Press, Reuters, Bloomberg, that kind of collect news, and then local papers push those news out. Weekly news magazines, Time, Newsweek, etc. Those would be considered legacy media. And then kind of the social media, that's kind of an in-between. Facebook is kind of in between legacy and new media. I would categorize it as new media, though, on balance. So what is new media? New media is anything that you're consuming through your smartphone, right? Twitter, X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Apple News, Newsmax is news media, blogs, Substack, podcast, streaming services. We have Glenn Beck and The Blaze, Tucker Carlson, Steve Deace, The Daily Wire, The Daily Signal, Washington Stand. These are all new media sources. And news now is completely decentralized. You have so many thousands and thousands. Even with cable, you got thousands of choices with TV. Before, you also had 3 channels. Now everything's turned on its head. The characteristic of new media that's really distinctive is totally decentralized. And it's interactive. It's not just them talking to you and telling you stuff. It's a debate. It's a conversation. It's posting. You have on Twitter now, you have Spaces, which is this amazing conversation between multiple people, complete free speech, people cursing, whatever. That goes both ways. But the point is it's unfiltered interaction. There's also immediate speed. I mean, you can literally break news on Twitter and it's worldwide instantly. You don't have to print the press. You don't have to do anything like that. And if it's out there and people are following you, they will see it. News is also on demand. It's streaming. It's personalized. It's more shorter content with powerful visuals and media. People are less likely to read now. They want to see pictures. They want to see visuals. They want to understand something in a matter of seconds. That's a negative and a positive. It's a negative because it makes the culture less deep and meaningful and understanding issues, but we have to be able to adapt to that because that's where they're at, right? And then the smartphone basically has given birth to the citizen journalist. Any person with a smartphone is now a potential reporter and a news source and can break news. That's very exciting because it empowers a local citizen to basically take control, take ownership, and be able to create change and get media out there. You do have to build a community. If you're on social media, you have to post content on a regular basis. You have to follow others and have them follow you. You got to share content. You got to share shows, being on somebody else's podcast, that kind of thing, collaborating with like-minded groups. But you got to build a reputation. You got to become an expert or authority on something for some group of people or an issue or a cause in order to get that community and following. And the reason this community is very important is because the legacy media is basically pushing us out. Many times we'll do a press conference and they don't show up. So if you have your own community, it doesn't matter if they show up or not. You can push out your own content to your own community, and it's still you're getting the same result. So the second thing we need to understand, you understand old news media. Second thing to understand is what is or is not news. Not everything is news. And a lot of the time this is, the left-wing media, they determine what's news, and that's bad because if it's not leftist, it's not news to them. For years, nobody would cover, for instance, transgender people who are detransitioning, right? The Chloe Coles of the world. They would refuse to do it. And I would have sincere conversations with top national reporters. And I would tell them, guys, why aren't you doing this? And they said, we just can't do it. So again, that's what is or is not news. Now, clearly, everyone would agree, lawsuits, anything official, criminal investigations, bills being filed, a candidate files for office, a candidate resigns, changes in positions, anything official in any branch of government, right? That is news. You can be sure that even the legacy media will be interested in that kind of news if you have it. There's other stories that are a little bit more questionable. We got to break some of the stories regarding the Boy Scouts change to open homosexuality. And even though at the time I was a state organization, we broke national news about the World Jamboree, giving out condoms and giving out, having alcohol. It was just pretty controversial stuff with boys and girls present. I think we broke the story on our website in a news release. Strang picked it up, and then it literally blew up worldwide. And it all came from a small, policy group in Florida. There's also this kind of side market for salacious media, kind of the Jerry Springer culture has created an appetite for it. You have supermarket tabloids, clickbaits ad everywhere, TZM, Howard Stern, Shock Jock, Entertainment Tonight. These are kind of quasi-news, quasi-entertainment things that you have to be aware of that exists. Sometimes your story may or may not serve and interest these outlets. Sometimes they may not. One thing you have to ask yourself before you start a press conference or do a news story is, who's your audience? What are you trying to reach? Are you trying to reach the larger legacy media? Are you trying to reach just your constituents? Are you trying to reach the general public? And then what's your message? What's the bottom line of your message, right? So you've got maybe the legacy media, your followers, maybe you just want to get government officials, right, to hear what you're saying. So on Twitter, you can tag certain people. They'll get their attention. I've done that with companies. I've gotten big results. Matter of fact, I remember, this is kind of crazy, but I went into a 7-Eleven. I used to like stevia a lot, the sugar substitute. And I said, hey, 7-Eleven, what's the deal? Stevia. Next thing I know, it shows up in 7-Elevens all over the country. So again, now, usually you can do a press release and that's it. But if you're going to do an event, if you're going to do a press conference, which most people like to do, this kind of traditional event, it could either be in person or by Zoom or conference call. But if you're going to be in person, choose a symbolic venue. I remember years ago, we actually endorsed Byron Donalds when he was just a state representative. He was running for Congress. There were 5 people in the race, powerful legislators. But I knew Byron had game. I knew he had oxygen. I knew he was going to be somebody really big someday. And so we endorsed him on the steps of the Capitol in his own community. We had his pastor there. We had his wife there. We had local people. And so that you choose a venue. I remember once I sued Disney once in a big copyright case as a lawyer, and we chose the Disney Amphitheater downtown, in downtown Orlando. So you choose a venue that somehow reflects the theme somehow. I remember we also protested the mayor of Jacksonville. Well, we went literally right outside the mayor of Jacksonville with about 500 women protesting him on some LGBT and gender bathroom issues. So choose a special venue, choose a venue that's attractive. If no one shows up, guess what? Doesn't matter. If you got a video, you got the camera running, if nobody shows up, literally nobody shows up, you can literally push it out yourself. That's the beauty of the new media. That's the beauty of the technology that we have. Now, let's talk about press releases. So you got your news story. Let's say, okay, I sued the mayor of Orlando with Anthony Sabatini, a local state legislator, because he made it a criminal penalty to have not have a mask during COVID. So what we do? Well, we went, hang on a second, previous. So there's 2 things. There's a press advisory and a press release. The press advisory is not telling them what it is. It's a way to entice them. So you're basically saying for immediate release, a major announcement is going to be made tomorrow on the steps of the Capitol or steps of the courthouse. You don't give the full news. You hint around. A major lawsuit against a government official involving fraud is going to be announced tomorrow at this time in this place, and you just kind of wet their whistle. You want to entice them to come to the event, right? Now, once you get to the event, then you break the news. Then a news release is handed out to the media and is released simultaneously to everyone virally, and it tells the whole story. And it's written just like a news article. So again, the first paragraph should have complete facts and notes to know exactly what it is. And then you unpack it, and then there's quotes and that kind of thing. But the idea is that in the press release, because news is so lazy right now and they're so underfunded, you should literally write it so you can just a reporter can just take it and cut and paste it, and it becomes a news story. And they can use exactly, so if you make it objective with quotes, maybe quotes on both sides, however you want to do it, but that's the goal of the press release. It is breaking news at that point. In a press release, in a press advisory, you just want for immediate release. So those are two urgency levels. But you want to make sure you have these two documents. I like to literally release the press release exactly the time that the press conference starts. We have somebody release it digitally, and when we hand it out to the media. That way, nobody can get the scoop in advance. Now, reporters are going to call you once you send the press advisory. Oh, what's this about? Can you give me a sneak preview so we can get a special thing? Unless you want to do that, you don't have to do that. Urgency levels, we talked about breaking news. Everybody's misusing breaking news now because you want to see what it is, but it's supposed to be something that's urgent, immediate, and significant. If it's not breaking news and you keep doing that, the New York Times is doing that all the time now. It's just kind of be like, you kind of lose people's respect. Immediate release means it can be shared immediately, and immediate advisory means, hey, no big deal. We're just alerting you to this upcoming thing that's happening. Now, there's types of media interviews. These are just toward the end of the conversation here if we have time for questions. Again, not everything is going to be an event, okay? A lot of times you can do phone, newspaper reporter interviews. To me, this is one of the most dangerous kind of interviews because you're unfiltered. They can ask you questions forever and ever and ever. They're hostile to you. What I like to do with major newspaper reporter interviews is I like to just say, you know what? Send me the questions in writing. That way you're writing them back. It's qualified. It's thoughtful. There's no loose words. I remember reporters getting me angry when I first started. I was a young lawyer talking about cases. There's none of that because you get time. Ask them for their deadline, and you can basically give exactly what you want to give. That way they don't exhaust you and filibuster you and get all these quotes, and then they pick out whatever they want. You can give them a tight statement. It's the only thing you're going to say. Also, live radio is very dangerous as well. Dangerous, I'm not saying you shouldn't take these risks. I'm just saying there's danger and there's risk in them. I remember NPR just opening up on me, like I was scheduled to do an interview on X, and they talked about an interview on Y where I was being, the Florida bar had some investigation against me, blah, 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 blah. And so it was kind of it was a setup, right? And they can really come after you, and it can become hostile real quick. Let's say Howard Stern shock jock radio stations. I remember once during the marriage amendment, somebody didn't screen it well, but I went on some South Florida, shock jock station talking about the marriage amendment. And I just literally got on at like 6 a.m. I was tired as I could be. And they just started coming at me really hard. You're a hater, blah, 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 blah. And I couldn't get out. I finally had to just end the interview and say, you know what? I appreciate your time. I got to go. And I just ended it. The safest ones are friendly radio. Very, very, Rush Limbaugh stations, Christian stations, conservative radio, and then local TV news. The reason local TV news is safe is because these are just young reporters. They're out of school. They're just, they had a news briefing in the morning. They got all the press releases in. And by the way, if you're going to do a press release, you need to follow up the press advisory and invite the press to your event. Remind them to come, remind them of it. Did you get it? Resend them to them, that kind of thing. But every morning, the newsroom is going to basically look and see what are the stories of the day. And they're going to, depending on what the priority of the news is, they're going to send out reporters to do stories. And these people are not liberal conservative. They're just there to do their job. They're just going to get a quote, especially if it's local news. So they're kind of safe interviews. They're going to talk to you for about 2 or 3 minutes. They're going to get about 10 seconds. I like to have this little game where I try to predict what they're going to pull out. So I try to say things that are, are tight and pungent and really the kind of things you want to take that are great quotes, and they can pick it up. So that's the media interviews. And I'm here to take any questions if I have time. I'm not sure, Dane, if I have time or not.
You still have 3 full minutes if you want it.
So yeah, is there any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions. I guess I'll ask one. What can you give us an example of like what you might send in like I don't know if you listed it and I apologize because I was doing some paperwork, but the in case you missed it is one of my favorites to send, or the just the statement on a something that's going on. Why won't it let me undo my video? Anyway, um I can't turn on my video. This webinar is so much fun today. So anyway, can you give me an example of in one of the cases where you might have sent in case you missed it, and what would be in the in case you missed it, and like if coming up with the reconciliation, how somebody might just send a statement.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, this is an extreme example, but on 9/11, like if you had a news story then, forget about it. No, there was only one news story, right? So when there's an impeachment, when there's an inauguration, when there's something really big, that dominates the news. So your news can get lost. So it's great to do, as Dina said, you can do it in case you missed it. There's an initial for that, an acronym, and you can just resend out old news and just send it out again because it still is news because people didn't see it, and it's still useful that way. But that's a real important point because, and by the way, Fridays, if you want to bury a story, let's say you're a government official, you have to actually do a news story. You want to put it on a Friday, that'll bury it as much as possible. If you want the news story to be heard more and be talked about throughout the week, you do it on a Monday or a Tuesday. Tuesday I like even better because Monday's kind of getting off the weekend for reporters. They're trying to get their ground. So I think Tuesday morning, Tuesday late morning, early afternoon is probably the best possible time. If you do it too late in the afternoon, you can't get it in that news cycle. So you want to do it mid-morning, not too early, but enough time for the reporter to get the story and get it in their news feed.